3 weeks ago, I sat in a Milwaukee courtroom watching my mother cry. It was not because she loved me, but because a judge asked one single question that silenced both my parents. If you think the worst betrayal comes from an enemy, listen closely. Sometimes it comes from the person who held the key to your house and the key to your life. They called me vindictive for reporting my sister, but the truth was much uglier. My name is Ginevra Hollowayne, and I sat in the austere, fluorescent-lit gallery of a Milwaukee County Circuit courtroom, watching the people who gave me life try to destroy what was left of it. The air in the room was stale, smelling faintly of floor wax and old paper, recycled through vents that rattled with a low, mechanical hum. It was cold, the kind of artificial chill that settles into your bones and makes you shiver even when you are sweating with anxiety. I sat with my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned a translucent white. Beside me, my husband, Franklin Rowland, was staring at the scuffed linoleum floor as if it were an abyss. Franklin is the kind of man who believes in the inherent goodness of people. He is a man who fixes things, who talks it out, who believes that a misunderstanding can always be cleared up with a calm conversation and a handshake. But sitting there on that hard wooden bench, he looked like a man whose entire worldview had been shattered. Just 2 hours before we walked through the metal detectors downstairs, his phone had buzzed. It was our mortgage broker, the house we had spent 3 years saving for, the 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb with the oak tree in the front yard, was gone. The financing had fallen through. Not because of a clerical error, and not because the market shifted. It fell through because the bank took one look at the new crater in my credit report, a crater the size of a luxury SUV, and decided we were radioactive. Franklin had not said a word since that call. He just held my hand, his palm damp, his grip loose, like he was holding on to a ghost. I looked toward the front of the room. Sitting at the defense table was my sister, Tessa Hollowayne. If you knew Tessa, or at least the version of Tessa she presented to the world on Instagram, you would not have recognized the woman sitting in that chair. The Tessa of the internet was all sharp contours, designer logos, and aggressive glamour. She was a woman who lived loudly. But today she was playing the role of her life. She was wearing a beige cardigan that was 2 sizes too big, swallowing her frame to make her look small and fragile. Her hair, usually blown out and highlighted to perfection, was pulled back into a messy, low ponytail. She wore no makeup. She looked like a tired, overworked librarian who had made a simple mistake. It was a costume. It was a calculated, deliberate manipulation of the visual narrative, and it made my stomach churn with a mixture of nausea and rage. Then the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. My parents, Howard and Marlene Hollowayne, walked in. My heart did a traitorous little flip in my chest, a reflex from a childhood spent seeking their approval. I wanted them to look at me. I wanted them to see me, but they did not. They walked down the center aisle, their eyes fixed firmly on the front of the room, on Tessa. They passed the row where Franklin and I were sitting. My father's shoulder brushed against the back of the bench mere inches from my arm. He did not turn. He did not pause. It was as if I were a piece of furniture, a stain on the wood, something inanimate and irrelevant. They walked straight to the front row behind the defense table and sat down directly behind Tessa. Marlene reached over the railing and squeezed Tessa's shoulder. Tessa slumped into the touch, playing the victim perfectly. I felt a hot sting of tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give them that satisfaction. Not here, not today. The proceedings were dry and procedural at first, a language of statutes and docket numbers that felt entirely too sterile for the emotional carnage taking place. But then, Tessa's defense attorney stood up. He was a slick man with a cheap suit and a voice that oozed rehearsed empathy. He addressed the judge, requesting permission to bring forward character witnesses before the preliminary sentencing discussions proceeded further. He wanted to show that Tessa was a good person, a pillar of the community who had simply fallen on hard times. Judge Renee Whitaker, a woman with steel gray hair and a face that revealed absolutely nothing. Nodded once. "Proceed," she said. The lawyer called my mother, Marlene, to the stand. Marlene walked up the few steps to the witness box with a slow, heavy gait. She looked like the picture of maternal grief. She swore to tell the truth, and for a second, I wondered if she even remembered what the truth sounded like. "Mrs. Holloway," the lawyer said gently, "can you tell the court about your daughter, Tessa?" Marlene took a shaky breath. She gripped the edges of the witness stand. "Tessa is a good girl," she began, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "She has always been a good girl. She has a big heart. She helps everyone. She just gets confused sometimes. She trusts people too much." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. Confused Tessa was 37 years old. She wasn't a confused child. She was a grown woman who had memorized my social security number. "And what about the situation with your other daughter, the plaintiff, Ginevra?" the lawyer asked, pivoting the narrative. Marlene turned then. For the first time since she entered the room, she looked at me. Her eyes were not filled with the warmth of a mother. They were cold, hard flint. It was a look I had seen 1,000 times growing up whenever I outperformed Tessa in school or saved money while Tessa spent hers. It was a look of resentment. "Ginevra," Marlene said, saying my name like it was a curse word. "Ginevra has always been difficult. She is very hard on her sister. She keeps score. She doesn't understand that family helps family." "Would you say she is pursuing this out of necessity?" the lawyer asked. "Leading her?" "No," Marlene said firmly. She sat up straighter, pointing a finger vaguely in my direction. "She is doing this because she is vindictive. That is what she is. Vindictive. She wants to see her sister suffer. She could have just talked to us. We could have handled this as a family. But she had to go to the police. She had to drag us all here. She wants to ruin Tessa's life because she is jealous." The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. Vindictive. I felt Franklin stiffen beside me. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that I didn't want to ruin anyone's life. I just wanted to be able to buy a house. I wanted to be able to answer my phone without fearing it was a debt collector asking for money I never borrowed. I wanted my credit score back. I wanted my name back. But I couldn't speak. The rules of the courtroom were absolute. I was a witness, a victim. But in this moment, I was an observer. If I made a scene, I would be the hysterical one. I would prove her right. So I sat there, vibrating with silence, letting her words paint me as the villain in my own mugging. Marlene stepped down, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. Then, my father, Howard, took the stand. If my mother's words were sharp daggers, my father's were blunt force trauma. He didn't look at me at all. He looked at the judge, man to man, projecting an air of weary reason. "It comes down to money, Your Honor," Howard said, shaking his head sadly. "Ginevra and her husband are obsessed with money. They care more about their bank accounts than their own blood. Tessa made a mistake, sure, we know that. But Ginevra, she saw a chance to cash out. She is trying to squeeze her sister. She wants to destroy this family over dollars and cents. It is greed, pure and simple." The audacity was so breathtaking, it almost felt physical. Greed. I was the one who had paid for my own college tuition while they bought Tessa a car. I was the one who worked overtime during the holidays while Tessa went on ski trips she couldn't afford. And now, because I refused to pay for the luxury hotels and designer bags Tessa had charged to my name, I was the greedy one. The injustice of it burned in my throat. It felt like I was drowning in plain sight, and the lifeguard was holding my head under the water while telling everyone I was trying to attack him. Judge Whitaker was writing something down. Her pen scratched against the paper, a dry, rhythmic sound in the silent room. She didn't frown. She didn't scowl. She just wrote. Her face was a mask of judicial neutrality. I searched her expression for a sign, any sign that she saw through them. Did she see the lie? Or did she see two heartbroken parents and a vengeful daughter? I looked at Tessa. She was still looking down at her lap. but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. It wasn't a smile. Exactly. It was a release of tension. She thought she had won. She thought the narrative had shifted. She thought that by painting me as the aggressor, she could walk away with probation and a slap on the wrist, leaving me to clean up the wreckage of my financial life for the next 7 to 10 years. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. Let me ask you something. If you woke up one morning and found that the foundation of your life had been termite-eaten by the people you were supposed to trust, what would you do if you found out that your future, your home, your security, your good name had been sold off piece by piece to pay for someone else's fantasy? Would you be angry, and if you went to the authorities to get back what was stolen from you, would you call that revenge? They call me vindictive. They say I'm cold. But is it vindictive to demand that the person who burned down your house should not be allowed to hold the matches anymore? I looked at my parents. They sat back down behind Tessa, righteous and indignant. They looked like they were the ones who had been wronged. They believed their own lie. They truly believed that I was the problem, because I refused to be the victim they needed me to be. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed. The court reporter's fingers flew across her stenotype machine. Judge Whittaker stopped writing. She set her pen down. It made a sharp clack against the wood of the bench. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She didn't look at the lawyers. She didn't look at Tessa. She didn't look at me. She looked directly at Howard and Marlene. She adjusted her glasses, leaning forward slightly over the bench. The movement was small, but it commanded the attention of the entire room. The rustling of papers stopped. The lawyer stopped shifting on his feet. Even Tessa looked up, sensing a shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room. The judge clasped her hands together. She looked at my parents with an expression that was no longer neutral. It was intensely, terrifyingly focused. Mr. and Mrs. Hollowayne, Judge Whittaker said. Her voice was calm, low, and terrifyingly clear. I have heard your statements regarding your daughter's character. You claim the plaintiff is acting out of vindictiveness and greed. Yes, Your Honor, my father said, nodding eagerly. Exactly. And you claim that this is a family matter that should have been handled internally. The judge continued. Yes, my mother breathed out, looking relieved. We just want peace. Judge Whittaker paused. She let the silence stretch out, pulling it taut until it felt like a wire wrapping around our throats. She looked from my father to my mother, and then finally, she asked the question, I swear to you, in that moment. Time stopped. It was a simple question. It wasn't full of legal jargon. It wasn't complicated. But as the words left her mouth, I saw the color drain out of my mother's face so fast, it looked like someone had pulled a plug. It was the question that stripped away the costumes, the lies, and the years of gaslighting in a single breath. The judge asked one simple question: to understand why the scene in that Milwaukee courtroom felt like the end of the world. You have to understand the world I had built before it fell apart. I am 34 years old, and up until 3 weeks ago, my life was a masterpiece of boring, beautiful predictability. I am not a risk taker. I am the kind of person who reads the terms and conditions before clicking accept. I am the kind of person who knows exactly how much money is in my checking account down to the cent at any given hour of the day. I work as a senior compliance officer at Lakefront Meridian Advisory. In the corporate world of downtown Milwaukee, my firm has a reputation. We are the people companies hire when they want to know where the money is leaking, and we are known for being surgically precise. My job is to look at rows of numbers and find the story they are hiding. I find the missing receipts. I find the phantom employees. I find the truth that mathematics refuses to conceal. I am very good at my job because I believe that numbers are the only language in the world that does not lie. People lie, families lie. But a bank statement is a brutal, honest historian. For the last 2 years, my husband Franklin and I had been living on a strict regimen of delayed gratification. We were renting a small, drafty apartment on the east side that smelled perpetually of the neighbors' curry and cat litter, but we didn't care because we had a plan. We were buying a house. It was not going to be a mansion. It was a 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb called Whitefish Bay. We had a spreadsheet that we updated every Sunday night. We tracked every single coffee, every gallon of gas, and every grocery run. We knew exactly when we would have the 20% down payment. We knew that with our combined credit scores hovering around 780, we would qualify for the best interest rates. We had calculated the property taxes. We had a fund for a new roof. We had a fund for a water heater. We were bulletproof, or so I thought. My obsession with financial security did not come from greed. It came from survival. I grew up in the Hollowayne house, where love was a currency that fluctuated wildly depending on the market conditions of my parents' moods. In our family, there were 2 distinct roles. My sister, Tessa, was the damsel. I was the safety net. Tessa is 4 years older than me. By the time I was 10, I had learned that the air in our house revolved entirely around Tessa's crises. She was beautiful, charismatic, and completely incapable of managing her own existence. She went to college for 6 years and changed majors 5 times. My parents paid for all of it. She moved to Chicago to become an event planner, then to Austin to be a stylist, then back to Milwaukee to start a jewelry line that never produced a single piece of jewelry. Each time she failed, she came home with tears in her eyes, and my parents would open their arms and their wallets. They called her a free spirit. They said she was just trying to find her path. Then there was me. I was the easy one. I was the one who didn't need braces. I was the one who got a scholarship so they didn't have to worry about tuition. I was the one who got a job at 16 and bought my own car. When I got married to Franklin, we paid for the reception ourselves because my parents had just spent $40,000 helping Tessa pay off a credit card bill she had racked up during a manic phase in Miami. My parents loved to tell people how strong I was. "Ginevra is so independent," my mother would say at dinner parties, beaming as if my independence was her achievement. We never have to worry about Ginevra. They didn't understand that strong was just a polite word for neglected. I became financially rigid because I knew that if I ever fell, no one was going to catch me. I had to build my own floor because the one in my parents' house was reserved for Tessa to collapse on. Franklin was the only variable in my life that I couldn't control with a spreadsheet. He is a high school history teacher with a heart that is too big for his chest. He loves my parents. He loves Tessa. He is the kind of man who thinks that if you just love people enough, they will eventually stop hurting you. He was always the one pushing me to go to Sunday dinners. He was the one who said we should invite Tessa over for holidays, even though she usually drank too much wine and made passive-aggressive comments about our furniture. "They are family, Jenna," Franklin would say, smoothing my hair when I was hyperventilating about a snide comment my mother made. "Family is messy, but we show up. That is what we do." I loved him for it, even as I hated it. I loved that he saw the best in them, even when I knew he was looking at a mirage. That brings me to the dinner. It was 3 months ago. Right around the time Franklin and I had finally hit our savings goal for the down payment, we went to my parents' house in the suburbs. It was a Tuesday, but my mother insisted on a celebratory family dinner because Tessa had just gotten a new job as a brand ambassador for some luxury vodka company. I arrived early, as usual. I spent an hour in the kitchen chopping vegetables and seasoning the roast because my mother was too busy setting the table with her good china. My father sat in the living room watching the news. The house felt warm and smelled of rosemary and garlic, a deceptive coziness that always made me let my guard down. Franklin was in the living room talking to my dad about the Brewers game. I was scrubbing a pot in the sink when the front door flew open. "Sorry I'm late," Tessa's voice rang out, breathless and bright. She swept into the kitchen, bringing a gust of cold air and expensive perfume with her. She looked fantastic. She was wearing a trench coat that looked like it cost more than my first car, and on her arm was a handbag. It was black leather with gold hardware, the kind of bag that has a waiting list. My mother abandoned the salad she was tossing and rushed over to hug her. "Oh, look at you. You look like a movie star." Tessa did a little spin. "Do you like it?" "It is a little treat for myself, to celebrate the new job." I dried my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. My auditor brain immediately started doing the math. The job she had just started was commission-based. She hadn't received a paycheck yet. That bag retailed for at least $3,500. "It is beautiful," I said, my voice flat. "Is that the new line?" "Yes," Tessa beamed, ignoring my tone. "I figured I need to look the part, right? You have to spend money to make money." My father wandered into the kitchen. He looked at the bag and then at Tessa with a soft, indulgent smile. "Distinctive," he said. "Suits you, sweetheart." No one asked how she paid for it. No one asked if she had rent money for next month. They just admired the shine. I felt that familiar, heavy stone settle in my stomach, the feeling of being the invisible servant in the royal court of Tessa. We sat down to eat. The conversation was dominated by Tessa's stories about the vodka brand, about the launch parties she was going to plan, about the influencers she was going to meet. Franklin listened raptly, asking polite questions. I focused on cutting my meat into perfect, tiny squares. Halfway through dessert, Tessa clapped her hand to her forehead. "Oh my God," she said. "I completely forgot. I need to send a contract back to my boss by 8 o'clock, or I'm going to lose the commission on the first event." She looked at her phone. "My data is acting up. Mom, is the Wi-Fi working?" "I think so," my mother said. "But the computer in the den is updating. It takes forever." Tessa turned her eyes to me. She had these wide, pleading eyes that she had perfected when we were toddlers. "Jenna, you brought your work bag, right? You always have your laptop. Can I just borrow it for 5 minutes? I just need to log into my email and forward a PDF. Please, it is super urgent." I hesitated. My work laptop was encrypted and locked down, but I had my personal MacBook in my bag. It had everything on it: my tax returns, my banking logins, my spreadsheets, my entire life. "I don't know, Tessa," I said. "I have a lot of sensitive stuff open." "Ginevra," my mother sighed, setting down her fork. "It is 5 minutes. Help your sister. Don't be so paranoid." "She just needs to send an email, honey," Franklin added gently, squeezing my knee under the table. "It is fine." I looked at them. I looked at my parents, who were looking at me with that familiar disappointment, waiting for me to be the difficult one. I looked at Franklin, who trusted everyone. And I looked at Tessa, who just wanted to do her job. "Fine," I said, "but use the guest browser." I walked over to my bag, pulled out the silver laptop, and set it on the table. I typed in my password. The screen came to life. I was about to open a guest window when my mother called out from the kitchen. "Ginevra, the coffee is boiling over." I jumped up. Instinct took over. I ran to the kitchen to save the stove. Behind me, I heard the click of keys. "I got it. Jen," Tessa yelled. "I am just using Chrome. Thanks. I spent 10 minutes in the kitchen cleaning up the coffee mess. When I came back, Tessa was closing the lid of my computer. She handed it back to me with a dazzling smile. "Save my life," she said. "You are the best." I slipped the laptop back into my bag. I felt a vague sense of unease, but I pushed it down. It was just an email. She was my sister. We were family. We left an hour later. Franklin drove us home, humming along to the radio, happy that the evening had gone smoothly without any fights. I watched the streetlights blur past, thinking about the house we were going to buy. I thought about the nursery I wanted to paint yellow. I thought about the garden I wanted to plant. I felt safe. I felt like I had finally built a wall high enough to keep the chaos of my family out. I did not know then that the wall had already been breached. I did not know that 5 minutes was an eternity to someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. I did not know that while I was wiping coffee off a stove, my sister wasn't sending a contract. She was going through my autofill settings. She was accessing the digital vault of my identity. She was taking photos of my Social Security card scan that I had saved in a folder for the mortgage application. I thought I was just lending her a tool. I did not know that I was handing her a loaded gun. And I certainly did not know that she would point it straight at the center of my life and pull the trigger without her hand even shaking. That night, I slept soundly, dreaming of mortgage rates and hardwood floors. It was the last peaceful night of sleep I would have, because while I was dreaming of building a future, my sister had already begun the process of demolishing it, brick by brick. The vibration of my phone on the desk was a dull, insignificant sound. It was Tuesday morning, just past 9 o'clock. The office at Lakefront Meridian Advisory was humming with the low-frequency energy of people caffeinating themselves for a day of audits. I was staring at a spreadsheet, cross-referencing a ledger for a manufacturing client, when the screen of my phone lit up. It was a notification from my credit monitoring app. Usually, I swipe these notifications away without looking. I know my score. My score is a statue carved from marble. It sits unmoving at 785, a testament to 15 years of paying bills the day they arrive and never carrying a balance. But this notification was different. It had a red exclamation mark next to it. The text preview read, "Alert, major change detected to your credit file." I reached for the phone. My hand was steady. I was not afraid. I assumed it was a glitch, perhaps a duplicate report, or a system update error. I unlocked the phone and tapped the app. The loading wheel spun for a second that felt entirely normal, before the dashboard refreshed. I stopped breathing. The number on the screen was not 785. The number was 542. I blinked. I actually rubbed my eyes and looked again, certain that the fluorescent lights above me were playing a trick on my retinas. But the number remained, 542, a drop of 243 points. It was impossible. It was the credit score of someone who had declared bankruptcy, or someone who had defaulted on a mortgage, or someone who simply did not care about their existence. A cold prickle of sweat broke out on the back of my neck. My heart, which had been resting at a calm rhythm, suddenly slammed against my ribs. I tapped the tab labeled, "See What Changed." The screen filled with a list. It was a long list. It was a list that defied physics. According to this report, in the last 4 months, the exact 4 months since that dinner at my parents' house, I had opened 7 new credit cards. There was a platinum card from a high-end travel rewards program. There was a store card for a luxury department store in Chicago. There was a line of credit at a jewelry retailer. And there was a personal loan for $15,000 taken out from an online fintech lender, the kind that approves you in minutes if you have the right social security number. I scrolled down, my finger trembling against the glass. The balances were maxed out, every single one of them. The utilization rate was at 98%. The total debt listed under these new accounts was $52,000. $52,000. The room began to tilt. The sounds of the office, the photocopier, the typing, the laughter from the break room sounded like they were coming from underwater. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me, so violent I had to grip the edge of my desk to keep from sliding out of my chair. This was a mistake. This had to be identity theft. Some hacker in a basement in Eastern Europe had bought my data on the dark web. That was the only explanation. I was about to dial the customer service number for the credit bureau when my work line rang. I stared at the handset. It was Franklin. I picked it up, desperate for his voice, desperate for him to tell me he had seen something weird too, that we would fix this together. "Jen." His voice was tight. It lacked its usual warmth. It sounded thin, stretched to the breaking point. "Franklin," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Something is happening. My credit app the bank just called me." He interrupted. He never interrupts me. "The underwriter for the mortgage. They are pulling the approval. Ginevra." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What? No, they can't. We have the pre-approval letter. We are closing in 3 weeks." "They ran the final credit check this morning," Franklin said. He sounded like he was in shock. "They said your debt-to-income ratio just skyrocketed. They said there is $50,000 of unsecured debt that we didn't disclose on the application. They asked me," his voice cracked. "They asked me if we were trying to commit mortgage fraud." "Fraud?" I choked out the word. "Franklin, you know me. You know I didn't do this." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a silence that lasted 3 seconds, but it felt like 3 years. In that silence, I heard the question he was too kind to ask but too human not to think. He was wondering. He was thinking about how I handled all the finances. He was thinking about how I never let him see the spreadsheets until they were finished. He was wondering if I had a secret life. "I know," he said finally, but the conviction wasn't there. I told them it was a mistake, but they listed the accounts. They said the payments on the personal loan are already 30 days past due. "I am going to fix this," I said, my voice rising. I stood up, ignoring the curious look from my cubicle neighbor. "I am going to call them right now. Do not talk to the bank again until I call you back." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold a pen. I grabbed a notepad. I needed to be an auditor now. I needed to stop being a victim and start being an investigator. I dialed the number for the credit card company that held the largest balance, the Platinum Travel Card, with a $12,000 limit. I navigated the automated menu, punching in my social security number with aggressive stabs of my finger. Finally, a human voice came on the line. "Security Department, this is Marcus. How can I help you?" "My name is Ginevra Holloway. I am looking at my credit report and seeing a card I never opened. This is fraud. I need you to close it immediately and flag the account." "I can certainly look into that for you, Ms. Holloway," Marcus said, his voice bored and professional. "I just need to verify some security information. Can you confirm the billing address on the file?" "It is 4522 Oakwood Drive. Apartment 4B, I said, reciting my address. "I am sorry," Marcus said. "That does not match the address we have on file for this account." I froze. "What?" "The address on file does not match. I cannot proceed without the correct verification." "I am telling you I didn't open the account," I hissed. "That is why I don't know the address. Tell me what address you have." "I cannot disclose that information for security reasons," he recited. I closed my eyes. I forced my brain to work. If it wasn't my address, whose address would a thief use? They wouldn't use their own. They would use a Dropbox. Or I thought about the 5 minutes with my laptop. I thought about the autofill settings. I thought about the specific questions Tessa used to ask me. "Is the address 1890 Maplewood Terrace?" I asked. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. There was a pause. "Yes," Marcus said. "That matches the billing address on file." The world stopped spinning. It just stopped. 1890 Maplewood Terrace. My parents' house. The house where I grew up. The house where I had eaten dinner 3 months ago. The house where my mother kept a garden of hydrangeas, and my father kept his golf clubs. It wasn't a stranger. A hacker in a basement doesn't ship the billing statements to my parents' house. A stranger doesn't use an address where they can physically retrieve the mail unless they live there. "Ms. Holloway," the operator asked, "are you still there?" "When was the card opened?" I asked. My voice sounded dead. "November 14th, he said. 2 days after the dinner. 2 days after I let Tessa use my laptop." I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I just let the device drop onto the desk. I felt sick, physically sick, as if I had swallowed broken glass. The betrayal wasn't just a concept anymore. It was a physical location. It was a house in the suburbs with a wreath on the door. I called the second bank, the one with the personal loan. "Verify your address," the automated system demanded. 1890 Maplewood Terrace, I said. "Confirmed," the robot replied. I called the third one. 1890 Maplewood Terrace. "Confirmed." It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. It was a systematic, deliberate execution of my financial character. Someone had sat down, applied for credit in my name, and directed all the correspondence to a house where they knew I would never see it. They had intercepted the cards. They had intercepted the statements. They had probably been checking the mailbox every day before my father got home from work. And it wasn't just anyone. It was Tessa. It had to be. The luxury goods, the travel, the sudden ability to keep up appearances. She wasn't earning commissions. She was harvesting my credit score. I grabbed my purse. I couldn't be here. I couldn't look at numbers. I couldn't listen to my coworkers complain about the coffee. I walked out of the office, bypassing the elevator and taking the stairs two at a time. I burst out into the cold Milwaukee air, gasping like I had just surfaced from drowning. I got into my car, but I didn't start the engine immediately. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed again. It was Franklin. Ginevra. Talk to me. The loan officer's saying if we can't prove this is fraud within 48 hours, the deal is dead, and they are talking about filing a suspicious activity report. Where are you? I stared at the message. Franklin wanted to believe in the best. He would say, maybe Mom and Dad didn't know. Maybe Tessa intercepted the mail without them seeing. Maybe it is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't spend $50,000, I whispered to the empty car. A misunderstanding doesn't hide bills for 4 months. I started the car. I pulled out of the parking garage, but I didn't turn toward the police station. I didn't turn toward my parents' house. I couldn't face them yet. If I saw Tessa right now, I would do something that would put me in a cell, not a courtroom. And I couldn't go to my parents because God, what if they knew? What if they had seen the letters? What if they had seen the new clothes and the new bags and just chose not to ask where the money came from because they preferred a happy Tessa to an honest one? And I couldn't go home. That was the hardest realization. I drove onto the freeway, merging into the traffic, heading nowhere. I was terrified to go home. I was terrified to walk through the door and look at Franklin. I was terrified that I would look into the eyes of the man who loved me and see a shadow of a doubt. We had built our marriage on transparency. We didn't have secrets. And now, there was a $52,000 secret with my name on it, even if I proved it wasn't me. The stain was there. The suspicion was there. The bank thought we were liars. I drove past the exit for our apartment. I drove past the exit for the new house, the house that was slipping through my fingers like sand. I drove until the city skyline was just a gray smudge in the rearview mirror. I was the victim of a crime. Yet I felt like the fugitive. I felt dirty. I felt stupid. I felt like the little sister who had been tricked again. Only this time, the trick hadn't just embarrassed me, it had erased me. I gripped the wheel until my hands ached, the tears finally spilling over, hot and angry. I wasn't crying because of the money. I was crying because I knew, with absolute certainty, that the life I had when I woke up this morning was gone. The Ginevra who had a perfect credit score and a happy family was dead. She had been murdered by her sister's greed and her parents' blindness. And now I had to figure out who was going to take her place. I stopped crying around noon. Tears are useful for grieving, but they are useless for auditing. And I realized with a sudden, cold clarity that I was no longer a wife mourning a lost house. I was a forensic accountant staring at a crime scene. I drove back to our apartment, not because I felt safe there, but because that was where my desktop computer was. I needed dual monitors. I needed processing power. I needed to turn the chaos of my emotions into the orderly rows and columns of a spreadsheet. If my sister wanted to play games with my financial identity, she was about to learn that she had picked a fight with someone who finds missing decimals for a living. I sat down at my desk and opened a new file. I named it simply The Theft. I logged into the 3 credit bureaus. I pulled the full, detailed reports. I downloaded every single statement from the 7 fraudulent accounts. I did not just look at the totals. I looked at the metadata. I looked at the transaction times. I looked at the merchant category codes. I began to build a timeline that would serve as the skeleton of her betrayal. The first thing I did was open Tessa's Instagram account on the second monitor. My sister is a compulsive oversharer. She treats social media like a diary where the only goal is to make everyone else envious of a life she does not actually possess. I placed the credit card statements on the left screen and her feed on the right screen. It was not a puzzle. It was a mirror. On November 20th, there was a charge for $450 at the Sanctuary Spa in downtown Milwaukee. I scrolled to November 20th on her feed. There was a photo of Tessa in a plush white robe, holding a cucumber slice, with the caption, "Self-care is not selfish. Sometimes you just need to recharge." She had recharged on my dime. I looked at December 5th. a charge for $890 at the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago, plus a room service charge for $120. I scrolled. There was a photo of a skyline view from a high floor, a glass of champagne in the foreground, captioned city lights and sleepless nights. Hustle hard, play hard. She wasn't hustling. She was stealing. The list went on. A sickening parade of gluttony. Designer sunglasses, a weeping fig tree from a high-end nursery, a set of silk sheets, a dinner at a steakhouse that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Each charge had a corresponding digital footprint. A photo where she preened and posed, soaking in the likes and comments from friends who called her a girl boss and a queen. They were cheering for a thief. But then I found the transaction that made something inside me snap. It was a charge dated January 12th. January 12th was my 5th wedding anniversary. Franklin and I had agreed not to exchange gifts. We were so close to the down payment goal that we decided to celebrate with a homemade dinner and a bottle of wine we had been saving. We made pasta. We danced in the living room. We talked about how next year we would celebrate in our new house. I looked at the statement. On January 12th, at 6 p.m, right around the time I was boiling water for linguine, a charge was processed at a boutique called Gilded Lily. The amount was $2,400. I went to her Instagram. I found the post. It was a photo of a gold bracelet, thick and heavy, resting on her wrist. The caption read, "A little anniversary gift to myself, because the most important relationship you have is the one with you." She had bought herself an anniversary gift on my anniversary, using my credit, while I ate pasta to save money for a future she was actively dismantling. I felt a cold rage settle over me, heavier and darker than the panic had been. This was not desperation. A desperate person steals bread. A desperate person pays the electric bill. This was malice. This was entitlement wrapped in silk and gold. I needed more than just matches. I needed proof of intent. I opened my message history with Tessa. I searched for keywords. I typed in mother. A text from October popped up. "Hey Jen, filling out a medical history form for that new dermatologist. What was Mom's maiden name again? My brain is fried." I had replied, "Whitmore, how do you forget that I searched for street? November 1st, Jen. Do you remember the name of that first street we lived on? The one with the blue house? I'm trying to reset my old email, and it is asking for security questions." I had replied Maplewood, but that was 20 years ago. I searched for pet. November 3rd. What was the name of that hamster we had? The one that bit Dad? I had replied, Mr. Chunky. I stared at the screen. At the time, these texts had seemed like random, scatterbrained questions from a sister who was notoriously bad with details. Now, I saw them for what they were. She was phishing me. She wasn't forgetting. She was harvesting the answers to standard security questions. She was building a key to unlock my life, but I needed the smoking gun. I needed to know how she verified the accounts initially. I remembered the dinner, the 5 minutes with my laptop. She had used Chrome. I opened my browser history, but it had been cleared. Of course it had. But Tessa is not technical. She is opportunistic. I logged into my secondary email account, the Yahoo address I use for junk mail and newsletters. It was the account that was logged in on that browser profile. I rarely check it. I went to the trash folder. It was empty. I went to the archive, and there it was. An email from Credit One Bank. Subject: Please verify your email address to complete your application. It was dated the night of the dinner. The timestamp was 7:45 in the evening. She hadn't just used my laptop to send a contract. She had opened a new tab, applied for the card using my social security number, which she likely had from snooping in my parents' filing cabinet years ago, and when the bank asked for email verification, she used the account that was already open on my screen. Then she clicked the link, approved the application, and archived the email so I wouldn't see it in the inbox. She did all of that while I was wiping coffee off the stove. But there was one piece missing: the mail. How did she intercept the physical cards without my parents noticing, even if she lived there? My father is meticulous about the mail. He sorts it the moment he gets home. I went back to the credit report. I looked at the section labeled Address History. There was a notation I had missed in my initial panic. Address change request, November 15th. She hadn't just used my parents' address. She had gone into the United States Postal Service system and put in a temporary forward for Ginevra Holloway. My hands flew to the keyboard. I logged into the USPS tracking portal. It is a tool we use at work to trace invoice deliveries. I punched in my details. There was an active forwarding order. It was not forwarding my mail to my parents' house generally. It was forwarding my mail to a specific post office box in the suburb where my parents lived. A P.O. box that I did not own. She had diverted my financial correspondence to a box she controlled, likely picking it up once a week, shredding the evidence, and keeping the plastic. That explained why I hadn't received my car insurance renewal notice last month. That explained why my birthday card from my aunt never arrived. She had not just stolen my money. She had stolen my name and routed it into a black hole. The front door of the apartment opened. I jumped, my heart hammering. It was Franklin. He looked 10 years older than he had this morning. His tie was loosened, his eyes red-rimmed. He walked into the room and saw me sitting in the dark, illuminated only by the glow of the monitors. He saw the spreadsheet. He saw the Instagram photos. He didn't say hello. He walked over and stood behind me, placing a hand on the back of my chair. He looked at the screen. He read the line item for the Gilded Lily purchase. He read the date. "She bought jewelry," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the optimism that usually defined him. "On our anniversary." "Yes," I said. He leaned in closer, pointing at the bottom of the credit report on the left screen. "Scroll down," he said, "to the loan documents." I scrolled down to the PDF of the $15,000 personal loan. It was signed electronically. "Look at the signature verification," Franklin said. I zoomed in. The lender used a dual-factor authentication that recorded the IP address and the answer to a specific out-of-wallet question generated at the moment of signing. The question was, "What is the nickname your father gave his first car?" The answer typed in the box was, "The Blue Bomber." Franklin let out a breath that sounded like a shudder. "I know that car," he whispered. "Your dad talks about it at every barbecue. He only tells that story to family." "It means," I said, my voice steady and cold, "that this wasn't a stranger, and it wasn't just Tessa being reckless. She had to sit there, read that question, and type in the answer that she knew, because she is his daughter. She used our family history to rob us." Franklin walked away from the screen. He sat down on the edge of the bed, putting his head in his hands. "I wanted to believe it was a mistake," he said. "I wanted to believe she just, I don't know, got confused or someone tricked her. But this is an operation. She planned this." "She has been planning it since November," I said. "She saw us saving. She saw us getting ready to leave, to buy our own place, to step out of their orbit, and she decided that if she couldn't have our stability, she would consume it." I turned back to the screen. The numbers stared back at me. $52,000. It was more than a year of my salary after taxes. It was our house. It was our safety. But more than that, it was a violation of the fundamental contract of sisterhood. She hadn't just borrowed a dress without asking. She had put on my skin and walked around town, racking up sins that I would have to pay for. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror on the closet door. I looked at myself. My eyes were puffy. My hair was a mess. I looked like a victim. I remembered what my mother always said. "Keep the peace. Ginevra, be the bigger person. Ginevra." Being the bigger person had cost me $50,000. Being the bigger person meant letting my sister cannibalize my future to feed her ego. "Franklin," I said. He looked up. "I am going to the police station," I said. "Your parents will never forgive you," he said. He wasn't trying to stop me. He was just stating a fact. "I know," I said. "But if I don't report this, I am accepting the debt, by law. If I don't file a police report for identity theft, the banks will hold me liable. I will have to pay for her spa days and her jewelry. I will have to admit that I am the one who was irresponsible." I grabbed my coat. "If I don't act," I said, looking at my reflection. I will have to live the rest of my life as a criminal with the name of a victim. I am not doing that. I am done being the safety net. I picked up the file folder where I had printed the spreadsheet and the screenshots. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon. "Are you coming?" I asked. Franklin stood up. He buttoned his coat. He looked at the file in my hand, and then he looked at me. The softness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hard, protective glint. "Let's go," he said. "Let's go show them what happens when they mess with the wrong accountant." We walked out of the apartment. I didn't look back. The spreadsheet was burned into my mind. Every row was a reason. Every number was a justification. They would call me cold. They would call me cruel. But they would never again call me a fool. The drive to my parents' house was a blur of gray asphalt and red taillights, a visual representation of the anger pulsating behind my eyes. Franklin drove. His hands were at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw set in a hard line I had rarely seen in our 5 years of marriage. We did not speak. There was nothing left to say to each other until we had heard what they had to say to us. We pulled into the driveway of 1890 Maplewood Terrace. It was a picture-perfect suburban evening. The lawn was freshly mowed. The porch light was on, casting a warm, welcoming glow against the white siding. And there, parked right in the center of the driveway, blocking the path to the garage, was a silver BMW X5. It was Tessa's car, or rather, it was the car Tessa leased. Seeing it there felt like a slap in the face. It was a physical manifestation of her presence, a shiny metallic declaration that she was here, safe in the sanctuary of our parents' home, while my financial life was bleeding out on a spreadsheet in my bag. "She is here," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "Good," Franklin said. "We do not have to hunt for her." We walked up the path. I did not knock. I still had a key, a brass key that I had kept on my ring since I moved out at 22. It felt heavy in my hand, like I was holding a lie. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The house smelled of pot roast and lemon polish. It was the smell of my childhood, a sensory trigger that usually made me feel safe. Tonight, it made me feel nauseous. They were in the living room. The television was on, tuned to a game show. My father was in his recliner, a newspaper folded on his lap. My mother was on the sofa, knitting something in pastel yellow, and Tessa was curled up in the love seat, scrolling through her phone, a glass of red wine resting on the coaster beside her. They looked up as we entered. For a split second, there were smiles. "Ginevra Franklin," my mother exclaimed, setting down her knitting. "What a nice surprise. We were just—" Her voice trailed off when she saw our faces. We did not look like people who had come for a casual Tuesday visit. I was clutching the file folder to my chest like a shield. Franklin was standing slightly behind me, his posture rigid. Tessa looked up from her phone. Her expression shifted from boredom to a flicker of wariness. She sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure before anyone else. "What is wrong?" my father asked. Sitting up. "Is everyone okay?" I walked to the center of the room. I did not take off my coat. I did not sit down. I tossed the file folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the wood and coming to a stop right in front of Tessa's wine glass. "Did you open 7 credit cards in my name?" I asked. My voice was not loud. It was deadly quiet. It was the voice I used when I found $1 million discrepancy in a client's ledger. The room went silent. The only sound was the clapping of the audience on the television screen. Tessa blinked. She looked at the folder, then at me, and then she let out a short, incredulous laugh. This was the first layer of her performance. The innocent confusion. "What?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Jenna, what are you talking about? You are scaring me." "Do not lie to me, Tessa," I said. "I have the credit reports. I have the transaction logs. I have the IP addresses. I know you used my social security number. I know you forwarded my mail to a P.O. box in this town. I know you answered the security questions about Dad's first car." Tessa's face changed. The innocence evaporated, replaced by a flustered, frantic energy. She set her phone down. She looked at our parents, then back at me. This was the second layer, the panic and minimizing. Okay, calm down, she said, holding up her hands. You are making this sound like a federal case. It is not what you think. I was going to tell you. I swear. You were going to tell me, I repeated. When before or after you bought a $2,400 bracelet on my anniversary, my mother gasped. Tessa. She looked at her eldest daughter. What is she talking about? Tessa stood up. She smoothed her oversized sweater, trying to regain some height, some dominance. I was in a bind, Mom. The new job required me to look a certain way. I had to front the costs for the wardrobe and the travel. My cards were maxed out because of the startup costs for the jewelry line. I just needed a bridge. She turned to me, her eyes pleading but hard. Jenna, I was going to pay it off. I have a big commission check coming next month. I was going to pay the balance and close the cards before you even noticed. It was a temporary loan. That is all. A loan implies consent, Franklin said. His voice was deep and shaking with suppressed anger. You stole her identity. You tanked her credit score. We lost the house. Tessa, the bank pulled our mortgage financing this morning because of what you did. Tessa flinched. For a second, she looked genuinely shocked. But then, the third layer descended, the layer that I knew best, the entitlement. Her face hardened. She crossed her arms over her chest. Well, I didn't know you were buying a house right now, she snapped. You didn't tell me. I don't have to tell you my life plans for you not to commit a felony against me, I shouted. The control was slipping. And don't call it a loan. You spent $50,000 on spas and hotels. That is not a bridge. That is a vacation. I have a lot of pressure on me, Tessa yelled back. It is easy for you to judge. You have the stable job. You have the perfect husband. You have always had it easy. Ginevra, you have never had to hustle like I do. I am building a brand here. I am trying to make something of myself so you all stop looking at me like a failure. So you made me a victim instead, I asked. Girls, please. My mother stood up, stepping between us. She did not look at the file. She did not look at the evidence. She looked at the volume of our voices. Stop shouting. The neighbors will hear. Mom, she stole $50,000 from me, I said, pointing at Tessa. She committed fraud. She said she was going to pay it back, my mother said. Her voice was soothing, the tone she used to talk us down from tantrums when we were 6. It was a mistake. Tessa, you shouldn't have done it without asking. That was wrong. But Ginevra, honey, do you really need to use words like fraud? She is your sister. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had taught me to tell the truth, who had punished me for stealing a candy bar when I was 5. It is fraud. Mom, I said. That is the legal definition, and I am not here to argue definitions. I am here to fix it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a document I had drafted before we left the apartment. It was a promissory note. It was simple, legally binding, and fair. I am willing to keep the police out of this, I said. I laid the paper on the table. If Tessa signs this, it is a confession of debt. It outlines a payment plan of $1,000 a month plus 5% interest until the $52,000 is repaid. It also requires her to hand over all the cards immediately so I can cut them up. I held out a pen. Sign it, and I won't file the police report. I will handle the bank, and we will call this a private family debt. It was a lifeline. It was more than she deserved. It was me, once again, trying to clean up the mess without burning the house down. Tessa looked at the paper. She read the terms. Her lip curled. $1,000 a month, she scoffed. Jenna, I can't afford that. My rent is $2,000. My car lease is $600. If I pay you $1,000, I won't have enough to live. Then get a cheaper apartment, I said. Get rid of the BMW. Stop going to the Ritz-Carlton. I can't sign this, Tessa said, pushing the paper away. What if I have a bad month? What if my commission is late? If I sign this and I miss a payment, you will sue me. Yes, I said. I will. See? She turned to our parents. She is trying to trap me. She wants to control me. She doesn't want the money. She wants to hold this over my head. I want my life back, I screamed. I want to buy my house. My father spoke then. He cleared his throat. He had been silent this whole time, watching us with tired, watery eyes. Ginevra, he said. I turned to him. Dad, tell her to sign it. He sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Ginevra, look at your sister. She is shaking. She is terrified. I am terrified, I said. I am $50,000 in debt. But you can handle it, my father said. The words hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. What? I whispered. You have always been the strong one. My father continued. You are resilient. You and Franklin, you are smart. You will figure this out. You will rebuild your credit. It might take a year or two, but you will be fine. But Tessa, if you saddle her with this debt, or if you report her to the police, it will destroy her. She won't survive it. She is fragile. Ginevra. I stared at him. I stared at the man who had walked me down the aisle. Are you asking me to pay for it? I asked. My voice was trembling. Are you asking me to eat $50,000 of debt because I am strong? We are asking you to be a family, my mother said softly. We can work something out. Maybe Dad and I can chip in a little here and there, but don't ruin your sister's life over money. Money is just paper. Ginevra, family is forever. I felt Franklin move beside me. He stepped forward, placing himself between me and my parents. With all due respect, Franklin said, and his voice was ice cold. That is not how this works. Ginevra did not sign up for this. We worked for every dollar we have. We ate leftovers for 3 years to save for that house. You are asking her to sacrifice our future to subsidize Tessa's delusions. Franklin, please, my mother said, looking at him with a disappointed frown. You are part of this family too. You are a teacher. You have a pension. You are stable. Why can't you just help? Why can't you put the debt on your cards for now? Shift it around until Tessa gets on her feet. You could help her. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother had just suggested that my husband, the man who had been nothing but kind and generous to them, should take on $50,000 of debt to protect the woman who had stolen from his wife. She saw us not as people, but as resources. We were the bank. We were the cleanup crew. Franklin looked at my mother. He looked at her as if he was seeing a stranger. I am not helping her hide a crime, Franklin said, and I am insulted that you would ask. He turned to me. Jenna, we are leaving. I looked at Tessa. She was smiling. It was a small, faint smile, hidden behind her hand, but I saw it. She knew. She knew they would protect her. She knew that her incompetence was her shield, and my competence was my punishment. I reached out and picked up the promissory note. I tore it in half. Then I tore it in half again. I let the pieces flutter down onto the coffee table, covering the file folder. You are right, Dad, I said. My voice was steady now. The tears were gone. The anger was gone. There was only a cold, hard resolve. I am strong. I am strong enough to survive this. I looked at Tessa. I offered you a way out, I said. I offered you a chance to fix this like a sister. But you don't want a sister. You want a victim. And Mom and Dad, you don't want justice. You want peace. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? My mother called out, her voice rising in panic. Ginevra, don't walk away like this. I stopped at the doorway. I looked back at the tableau of my family, the parents who enabled, and the sister who took. I am going to the police station, I said. If you do that, my mother cried, standing up, you are tearing this family apart if you report her. Don't bother coming back for Christmas. Don't bother coming back at all. I won't, I said. Ginevra, my father barked. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. I am letting the authorities decide who is right. Since you clearly can't, I opened the door. The cool night air rushed in. cleansing the smell of pot roast and betrayal. "I will handle this on my own," I said, looking at them one last time. "But this time, I am doing it by the law." I slammed the door. I walked down the path to the car, my heels clicking on the pavement like the gavel of a judge. Franklin was right beside me. He opened the car door for me, and as I slid into the seat, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was truly an orphan, and strangely, I had never felt more free. The next morning, the sun rose over Milwaukee with a cheerful, oblivious brightness that felt insulting. I did not sleep. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to Franklin's breathing, and replaying the scene in my parents' living room. I kept hearing my father's voice telling me I was strong, and my mother's voice telling me I was ruining the family. They had drawn a line in the sand, and they had placed themselves on the side of the criminal. Now, I had to decide if I had the stomach to cross it. I went into work early, not to do my actual job, but to consult the one person I knew who viewed the law as a mechanic views an engine. Caleb Strand works in our firm's risk management division. He is a man who wears three-piece suits on casual Fridays and reads case law for fun. I walked into his office at 7 in the morning, placed a cup of black coffee on his desk, and laid out the situation. I did not use names. I did not say, "my sister." I used the terms perpetrator and victim. Caleb listened, his face impassive. When I finished, he leaned back and tented his fingers. "If you do not file a police report," Caleb said, his voice clipped and professional, "you are essentially acting as an accessory to the fraud after the fact. The banks will not help you. The credit bureaus will not help you. Without an official identity theft report filed with the Federal Trade Commission and a corresponding police report number, you are just a person with buyer's remorse claiming you didn't buy the shoes." "I know," I said. "I am going to file." "Good," Caleb said. "But you need to understand the sequence. First, you file the affidavit with the FTC at identitytheft.gov. That generates your recovery plan. Then, you take that affidavit to the local police precinct. You get a hard copy of the report. Then, you send both of those documents to the 3 credit bureaus Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. You place an extended fraud alert, which lasts for 7 years, and Ginevra. Yes. You need to freeze your credit, not lock it, freeze it. A lock is a convenience feature. A freeze is a legal padlock. It means no one, not you, not your husband, not the President of the United States, can open a new line of credit in your name without a PIN that only you possess. "I did the freeze last night," I said. "And one more thing," Caleb said, lowering his voice slightly. "Once you file that police report, the train leaves the station. The district attorney picks it up. You cannot just call them up in a week and say, 'Never mind, we hugged it out. It is out of your hands.' You are handing a loaded weapon to the state of Wisconsin." "I know," I said again. "The weapon was already fired. Caleb, I'm just trying to pull the bullet out." At 10 o'clock that morning, Franklin met me outside the District 7 police station. It was a brick building that looked like a fortress. Franklin looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his tie was crooked. I reached out and straightened it. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I said. But let's go." The inside of the station smelled of floor wax and stale adrenaline. We waited on a hard plastic bench for 40 minutes before a uniformed officer led us back to a small interview room. It was not like the movies. There was no two-way mirror, just a gray table, 3 chairs, and a poster on the wall about community policing. Detective Lila Moreno walked in 5 minutes later. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She did not smile. She sat down, opened a laptop, and looked at me. "I have your initial complaint here," she said. "Identity theft involving family members. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. I placed my file on the table, the spreadsheet, the screenshots, the credit reports, the timeline. Detective Moreno pulled the file toward her. She flipped through the pages. Her eyebrows went up when she saw the spreadsheet. "You did your homework," she said. I am an auditor, I said. I follow the numbers. She spent 10 minutes reading in silence. Then she looked up. This is not a dispute over authorized use, she stated. She applied for cards you didn't know about. She diverted mail. She forged electronic signatures. Yes, I said. This is a felony, Moreno said. Her voice was matter-of-fact. In Wisconsin, identity theft, where the loss exceeds $2,500, is a Class H felony. You are alleging a loss of over $50,000. That pushes it into a much more serious category. We are talking about potential prison time, probation at a minimum, a permanent criminal record. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. I need to be very clear with you, Mrs. Holloway. We get a lot of these cases where families use the police as a leverage tool. They file a report to scare the brother or the sister into paying, and then they try to drop the charges. I do not have time for that. If I open this investigation, I am going to subpoena bank records. I am going to get the IP logs from the internet service providers. I am going to get the surveillance footage from the stores where she used the cards physically. I am going to build a case to convict. Is that what you want? I felt Franklin's hand on my knee. He was gripping it tight. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about Christmas. He was thinking about the awkward silence at funerals. He was thinking about the fact that we were about to nuke the village to save the house. But then I thought about the text messages. I thought about the 5 minutes with my laptop. I thought about my mother saying, "Money is just paper." This is not a family drama, detective, I said. My voice did not shake. This is a crime. She stole my life. I want to press charges. Detective Moreno nodded. She pushed a form across the table. Sign here, she said. This is your sworn statement. Once you sign this, you are the complaining witness. I picked up the pen. The plastic barrel felt cold against my fingers. I looked at the signature line. It was just a line of black ink, but it felt like a cliff edge. If I signed this, I was no longer Ginevra the daughter or Ginevra the sister. I was Ginevra the victim. I was Ginevra the prosecutor. I signed. The scratch of the pen on the paper sounded incredibly loud in the small room. Okay, Moreno said, pulling the paper back. I am going to issue subpoenas for the credit card applications and the ISP logs immediately, given the amount of money and the clear paper trail you have provided. This will move relatively quickly. I will likely be paying a visit to Ms. Tessa Holloway within the week to bring her in for questioning. Will she be arrested? Franklin asked. If the evidence matches what you have shown me, yes, Moreno said. She will be booked. She will be fingerprinted. She will have a mugshot taken. We walked out of the station into the blinding daylight. I felt lightheaded. It is done, Franklin said. It has just started, I replied. I could feel the distance between us. It wasn't that he didn't support me. He was angry too. But Franklin is a man of peace. He hates conflict. And I had just initiated a war. I could feel him already mourning the loss of the extended family he had adopted. He was wondering if our marriage could survive the fallout of putting my sister in handcuffs. A lawsuit is ugly. A criminal trial is a public flaying. I have to call my mother, I said as we got into the car. Jenna, don't, Franklin said. Just let the police handle it. No, I said. I am not going to let them find out from a uniform knocking on the door. I am going to tell them exactly where I stand. I am done hiding. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the home number. My mother picked up on the second ring. Ginevra? Her voice was hopeful. Did you calm down? Are you coming over for dinner? Dad is making chili. The normalcy of it made me want to scream. She was pretending last night hadn't happened. She was rebooting the simulation. I am not coming for dinner, Mom, I said. I am calling to tell you that I just left the District 7 police station. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, suffocating silence. What did you do? She whispered. I filed a police report for identity theft and fraud against Tessa, I said. I gave them the evidence. Detective Moreno is taking the case. You went to the police. Her voice rose to a shriek. After we begged you, after your father told you not to. I did what I had to do to protect myself, I said. Since you wouldn't, you cancel it, she hissed. You go back in there right now, and you tell them it was a mistake. You tell them you gave her permission. I can't do that. Mom, that is filing a false police report. That is a crime, and I didn't give her permission. I don't care, she screamed. She is your sister. How could you be so cruel? She will go to jail. Ginevra, do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason your sister is in a cage? She put herself in a cage when she stole $50,000, I said. Listen to me, my mother said. Her voice dropped to a low, trembling register that I had never heard before. It was a voice devoid of love. It was the voice of an enemy. If you do not fix this, if you let them arrest her, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You are no longer my daughter. I will not have a child who betrays the family. If that badge comes to my door, you lose your parents. That is the choice. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I looked at Franklin, who was watching me with sad, resigned eyes. I guess I am an orphan then, I said, because I am not withdrawing the report. Then don't ever call this number again, she said, and she hung up. The click of the disconnection felt like a physical severance. I sat there in the passenger seat, holding the phone, staring at the screen until it went black. I had expected anger. I had expected guilt. But the absolute, immediate excision. It proved what I had always feared deep down. My membership in the family was conditional. It was based on my utility. As long as I was the low-maintenance, high-achieving daughter who asked for nothing, I was loved. The moment I demanded justice, I was discarded. She is gone, I said to Franklin. They are all gone. We drove home in silence. We ordered takeout because neither of us had the energy to cook. We ate on the couch, watching a sitcom we didn't laugh at. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting a text from Franklin even though he was sitting right next to me. Or maybe a delayed guilt text from my father. It was a number I did not recognize. I opened the message. There was no text at first, just an image. I tapped to download it. When the picture resolved, my blood ran cold. It was a photo of a document. It was my birth certificate, the original one with the raised seal. And next to it, my social security card. And next to that, a page from an old tax return of mine from 3 years ago. I recognized the background. It was the granite countertop in my parents' kitchen. Then a text bubble appeared below the image. I have copies of everything. Medical records, employment contracts, stuff you don't even remember you left in the attic. If you think you can ruin me without me taking you down with me, you are wrong. Drop the case, or everyone gets to see everything. I stared at the screen. The malice radiating from the pixels was palpable. This was not a panic reaction. This was a threat. This was Tessa telling me that she held the archive of my life hostage. She was weaponizing the fact that I had trusted my parents' home as a safe repository for my history. What is it? Franklin asked. Seeing the look on my face, I handed him the phone. He looked at the image. He read the text. His face went pale. She is threatening to leak your personal documents, he asked. To who? The internet? Or the dark web? I said. Or just to use them to open more accounts before the freeze fully propagates across all the minor lenders. Or maybe she just wants me to know that she can hurt me. Franklin handed the phone back to me. We need to send this to Detective Moreno. Right now. This is witness intimidation. This is blackmail. I know, I said. I took a screenshot of the text. I forwarded it to the email address the detective had given me. I put the phone down on the coffee table. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I felt a fear I had never known before. It was the fear of a hunted animal. My sister was not just a thief. She was a predator who had been cornered, and she was baring her teeth. I looked at Franklin. He looked terrified. He looked like a man who just wanted his quiet life back. Are you sure we can still stop? We can just pay the debt, walk away, cut them off, but not do this. She is dangerous. Jen, he started. I looked at him. I loved him. I wanted to give him the peace he craved. But I knew that if I stopped now, if I let this threat work, I would never be free. I would spend the rest of my life waiting for the next text, the next bill, the next betrayal. I am scared, I whispered. I am terrified. Franklin, I feel like I am standing in a house that is burning down. I reached out and took his hand. But I am more scared of what happens if I bow down, I said. If I let her win, I am saying that my life matters less than her comfort. I am saying that it is okay to abuse me as long as we pretend we are a happy family. I can't live like that. I won't live like that. I looked at the black screen of my phone. Let her post the documents, I said. Let her scream. Let her threaten. I have the truth, and I have the law. And for the first time in 34 years, that is going to be enough. Franklin squeezed my hand. He didn't say anything, but he didn't let go. And in that silence, I knew we had crossed the point of no return. The bridge was not just burned, it was demolished. The only way out now was through the fire. 3 days after I filed the police report, my phone buzzed with a text message from my father. It was short, devoid of the usual emojis he used to send, and it carried the weight of a summons. Family meeting, Saturday, 1 o'clock. Do not bring the police, just family. We need to settle this. I showed it to Franklin. He looked at the screen with the weary expression of a man who has been dragged into a war he never enlisted for. It is a trap, Jen, he said. You know that, right? They are not going to apologize. They are going to circle the wagons. I know, I said. Buttoning my blazer, I chose my outfit carefully. Sharp lines, dark colors, armor. But I need to look them in the eye one last time. I need them to see that I am not hiding. If I don't go, they will tell themselves I was too cowardly to face them. They will rewrite the history to say I abandoned the family without a conversation. I am coming with you, Franklin said. I wouldn't go without you, I replied. We drove to the house on Maplewood Terrace for the second time that week, but this time, the driveway wasn't just occupied by Tessa's BMW and my parents' sedan. It was a parking lot. My Aunt Linda's minivan was there, my Uncle Jerry's truck, my cousin Beatrice's compact car. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a conversation, it was an intervention, or worse, a tribunal. We walked into the house, and the air was so thick with tension you could almost taste the metallic tang of it. They were all gathered in the living room, sitting in a semicircle of judgment. My parents were in the center. Tessa was curled up in the corner armchair, clutching a tissue, looking small and devastated. Surrounding them were my relatives, people who had pinched my cheeks when I was a baby. People who had given me savings bonds for graduation. People I had spent every Thanksgiving with for 34 years. They stopped talking when we entered. 12 pairs of eyes locked onto me. There was no warmth in them. There was only a collective, suffocating disappointment. You came, my father said. He didn't stand up. I thought it was just us, I said, gesturing to the crowd. I didn't know we were selling tickets. We are all family here. Ginevra, Aunt Linda said. She was sitting next to my mother, her hand resting protectively on Mom's knee. Linda had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over arguments with casserole and platitudes. Today, her face was hard. We are all worried about you. We are worried about what you are doing to your sister. What I am doing, I asked, my voice rising slightly. Aunt Linda, did they tell you what she did? Did they tell you about the $50,000? Did they tell you about the mortgage I lost? We know there were some financial irregularities, Uncle Jerry said. He was a man who believed in handshake deals and hated the government. But Ginevra, you involve the law. You bring the police into a private home. That is not how we do things. That is a betrayal of blood. Theft is a betrayal of blood, Jerry, Franklin said, stepping forward. She stole from us. For 4 months. She is sick, my mother burst out. She pointed at Tessa. who let out a perfectly timed sob. Look at her. She is under so much pressure. She made a mistake. She was desperate, and instead of helping her, instead of coming to us so we could handle it as a family, you tried to destroy her. You want to give her a criminal record. Ginevra. Do you know what that does to a person's life? She will never get a good job again. She doesn't have a good job now, I argued. She is living off stolen money. It is just money, Cousin Beatrice chimed in. She was younger, a year below me in school, and had always idolized Tessa. Money comes and goes, Genro, but she is your sister. You can't buy a sister. You are acting like a corporation. It is so cold. The word hung there. Cold. It was the narrative they had constructed. I was the accountant, the robot, the one who cared more about credit scores than human beings. Tessa was the vibrant, messy, lovable human who had just slipped up. I am not a corporation, I said, my voice shaking with the effort to remain calm. I am a person who wants to buy a home. I am a person who doesn't want to spend the next 10 years paying for Tessa's trips to the Ritz-Carlton. We can fix the money, my father said dismissively. We could have worked out a payment plan. But you didn't give us a chance. You went straight to the nuclear option because you are angry. You have always been jealous of her. I froze. Excuse me? You know it is true, my mother said, nodding. She looked around the room, gathering support from the audience. Tessa has always been the one who shines. She has a big personality. She takes up space, and you have always resented that. You have always been quiet, in the background. You saw a chance to take her down a peg, to be the one in power, and you took it. This isn't about the credit cards. Ginevra, this is about you wanting to punish her for being loved. The gaslighting was so precise, so breathtakingly audacious, that I almost admired it. They had taken a felony fraud case and turned it into a childhood sibling rivalry. They were rewriting reality in real time. That is insane, Franklin said. That is absolutely insane. Ginevra has supported this family for years. She is the only reason. Franklin, son. Uncle Jerry interrupted, standing up and putting a heavy hand on Franklin's shoulder. It looked friendly, but the grip was tight. You are a good man, but you are letting your wife lead you down a dark path. You are the head of your household. You need to talk some sense into her. You need to tell her to drop this case. Do you really want to be the guy whose wife put her sister in prison? How does that look at the Thanksgiving table? There won't be a Thanksgiving table for us, Franklin said, shoving Jerry's hand off. Not if this is how you treat the victim. Tessa spoke then. She wiped her eyes and looked up, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. The worst part, Tessa said, looking at Aunt Linda, is that she said I could. I whipped my head around. What? Tessa pulled out her phone. She held it up for the room to see. I asked her, back in November. I told her I was in a bind and needed to borrow her info for a bit to get approved for some bridge financing, and she said fine. She said, fine, just don't make a mess. And now she is pretending she didn't because she is mad. I spent more than I thought I would. That is a lie, I screamed. I couldn't help it. I never said that I let you use my laptop to send an email. I saw the texts, Ginevra, Aunt Linda said sadly. Tessa showed us. You said, fine. You authorized it. I realized then what she had done. She had taken my text fine, but used the guest browser and cropped it. Or she had taken a verbal fine from a different conversation and contextualized it. She was manufacturing consent. Show me the full text, I demanded, reaching for her phone. Show me the timestamp. Show me the thread. Tessa pulled the phone back, clutching it to her chest like a baby. I am not giving you my phone so you can delete it. You are trying to frame me. She agreed to it, my father said, standing up to block me from getting near Tessa. And even if she didn't agree to the full amount, she opened the door. You can't invite someone in and then call it a burglary. Ginevra, that is entrapment. I looked around the room. I looked at the faces of my family. They were nodding. They bought it. Or rather, they chose to buy it because it was easier. It was easier to believe that I was a vindictive, jealous sister who had changed her mind than to believe that the golden child was a felon. If they admitted Tessa was a criminal, they had to admit they had raised one. If they blamed me, the family unit remained intact, just minus one bad apple me. "You are all delusional," I said. "Every single one of you. You are sitting here defending a crime because you are too weak to deal with the truth." "We are defending family," Cousin Beatrice yelled. "We forgive each other. That is what families do." "Forgiveness requires repentance," I yelled back. "She isn't sorry. She is lying right now." "She is stressed," my mother screamed. "Look at her. She is shaking." The noise in the room was deafening. Everyone was shouting. Uncle Jerry was telling Franklin to man up. Aunt Linda was crying about how Grandma would be rolling in her grave. My father was lecturing me about loyalty. And then, in the middle of the cacophony, my Aunt Sarah, my father's older sister, a woman who usually drank too much sherry and had no filter, spoke up from the back of the room. "Well," Aunt Sarah said, her voice cutting through the noise like a serrated knife. "Say what you want about the girl, but at least she helped out. If it weren't for those cards, Howard, you guys would still be drowning in that tax lien. At least the money went to something useful." The room went silent, instantly. It was a silence so sudden and so profound, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the universe. My father turned to look at Aunt Sarah. His face went gray. My mother froze, her hand halfway to her mouth. Tessa stopped crying. I looked at my father. Then I looked at Aunt Sarah. "What did you say?" I asked. My voice was very soft. Aunt Sarah looked around. Realizing she had violated the script, she swirled her drink nervously. "Oh, nothing. I just meant, everyone has debts. We all help each other." "No," I said. I stepped closer to my father. "What tax lien? Dad?" My father looked at the floor. He couldn't meet my eyes. "It was a small issue," he mumbled. "The property taxes. We got behind a few years. The county was threatening to put a lien on the house." I did the math in my head. I remembered the transaction list. There were cash advances, large ones, $5,000 here, $3,000 there. I had assumed Tessa was using them to pay for drugs or gambling or just cash spending money. "Did she give you money?" I asked. "She helped us out," my mother whispered. She looked terrified. "She said she got a bonus. She said she wanted to help us save the house. We didn't know where it came from. Ginevra, we thought she was doing well." "You didn't know," I laughed. It was a cold, jagged sound. "She has been unemployed for 6 months. She suddenly hands you $10,000 in cash, and you don't ask where it came from. You didn't ask." "We needed the money," my father snapped, his defense crumbling into desperation. "We were going to lose the house. Your childhood home. What were we supposed to do? Interrogate her?" "Yes," I screamed. "Yes, you were supposed to interrogate her instead. You took the money. You took the money that she stole from me." I looked at Tessa. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her fingernails, a small, smug smile playing on her lips. She hadn't just stolen for herself. She had bought their loyalty. She had used my credit to pay off their debts. That was why they were circling the wagons. That was why they were so desperate for me to drop the charges. If the police investigated, they wouldn't just find Tessa's spa trips. They would find the cash advances. They would trace the money to my parents' bank accounts. My parents weren't just enablers. They were beneficiaries. They were fencing stolen goods. "You aren't protecting her," I said, looking at my mother with a disgust I had never felt before. "You are protecting yourselves." My mother started to cry. But this time, it was real tears. It was the tears of someone who has been found out. "Ginevra, please, we didn't know it was you. We thought maybe she had a rich boyfriend. We didn't ask. We just wanted to be safe." "So you saved your house by burning down mine," I said. I looked at Franklin. He was staring at them with open horror. "We are leaving," I said. "Ginevra, wait," Aunt Linda called out. "You can't leave like this. Think about what this will do to them." If the police find out your parents took the money, they could be in trouble too. They should be in trouble, I said. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the door. I could feel their eyes on me, burning with hatred. They didn't hate me because I was wrong. They hated me because I was the mirror reflecting their own corruption. "If you walk out that door," my father yelled, his voice cracking, "you are tearing this family apart." I stopped. I didn't turn around. The family was already torn apart. "Dad," I said, "you just sold the pieces." I walked out. Franklin followed me. We got into the car. I locked the doors. Even though we were moving, I felt cold, bone-deep cold. I didn't cry. I felt like I had been crying for weeks. And now the well was dry. All that was left was the dry, arid landscape of the truth. I pulled out my phone. I opened the text thread with Detective Moreno. I typed with steady fingers, "Detective Moreno, I have new information. I just left a meeting with my family. It appears that a portion of the stolen funds was used to pay off a tax lien on my parents' property at 1890 Maplewood Terrace. My parents admitted to accepting cash from the suspect. I believe they are material witnesses, and possibly accomplices. Please expand the scope of the subpoena to include their financial records." I hit send. I watched the little delivered checkmark appear. I looked at the house one last time. It looked the same as it always had: warm, inviting, safe. But now I knew it was just a facade. It was a house built on lies, held together by guilt, and paid for with my future. "Drive," I said to Franklin. "Get us away from these people." As we pulled away, I realized I wasn't losing a family. I was escaping a cult. And for the first time since the nightmare began, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the only person who was actually awake. The fluorescent lights of the interview room at the District 7 station seemed to hum with a frequency that vibrated right against my skull. It had been 4 days since the family meeting, 4 days since I walked out of my parents' house and left the illusion of a happy childhood behind on the living room rug. Detective Moreno walked in, carrying a file that had grown significantly thicker since our last meeting. She did not look like a woman who was dealing with a domestic squabble. She looked like a hunter who had just found a blood trail leading to a much larger animal than she initially expected. "We got the returns on the subpoenas," Moreno said. Sitting down, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "And I have to tell you, Mrs. Holloway, your sister is not as clever as she thinks she is, but she is also not new at this." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "What do you mean?" "We ran a cross-check on her name and social security number through a national fraud database," Moreno said. "This isn't the first time Tessa Holloway has been flagged for identity theft." I stared at her. "What, 5 years ago, in Chicago?" Moreno continued, opening the file. "There was a police report filed but later withdrawn. The complainant was a woman named Jessica Vane. She was your sister's roommate at the time." "I remember Jessica," I whispered. "Tessa said they had a falling out because Jessica was crazy and obsessive." "Jessica wasn't crazy," Moreno said dryly. "Jessica found out that Tessa had used her driver's license to lease a car, a Volkswagen Jetta. Tessa drove it for 6 months while Jessica got the collection notices. Jessica filed a report, but 2 weeks later, she dropped the charges. The notes in the file say the parties reached a civil settlement." I closed my eyes. A civil settlement. That meant my parents. My parents had paid Jessica off. They had covered up a felony 5 years ago. They knew. They had known all along that Tessa was capable of this. They hadn't just ignored the red flags. They had bought the red paint. "So I am just the next mark," I said, my voice hollow. "I am not special. I am just the first one they couldn't buy off." "Exactly," Moreno said. "But this time, the evidence is not going away." We pulled the IP logs from the credit card applications. 3 of the 7 cards were applied for using an internet connection registered to Howard Holloway at 1890 Maplewood Terrace. "I figured that," I said. "She was staying there." "We also pulled the device history from the router," Moreno said. And we subpoenaed the cloud data from the printer connected to that network. Did you know your parents have a smart printer one that stores a history of recent scans? I bought it for them for Christmas last year, I said. The irony tasted like ash. Well, that printer was used on November 14th to scan a passport and a social security card, Moreno said. Yours. The metadata shows the file was then emailed to an account linked to Tessa. I nodded. It was a violation. But it was expected. I had already accepted that Tessa was a predator. But here is where it gets interesting, Moreno said. She pulled out a photocopy of a delivery receipt. This is from the courier service that delivered the platinum travel card. The bank required a signature upon delivery because of the high credit limit. The card was shipped to 1890 Maplewood Terrace. Tessa must have signed for it, I said. Moreno slid the paper across the table. Look at the signature. I looked. It was a scrawl of black ink, hasty and looped. It did not say Tessa. It said Marlene Holloway. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the edge of the table. My mother, I whispered. Your mother signed for a credit card addressed to you, Moreno said. A card that she knew you didn't apply for, because it was delivered to her house, not yours, and she didn't call you. She handed it to Tessa, or she opened it herself. She knew, I said. The realization wasn't a spark. It was an avalanche. She didn't just look the other way. She handled the logistics. She was the gatekeeper. Franklin, who had been sitting silently beside me, made a sound of pure disgust. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. Detective, Franklin said, his voice tight. There is something else. After the meeting with the family, I went back through our mortgage denial paperwork. I wanted to see if we missed anything. He laid a page on the table. It was a detailed inquiry history from the mortgage lender. Look at this date, Franklin said, pointing to a line item. October 22nd. There was a hard inquiry on Ginevra's file from a payday loan provider. It was denied because of a mismatch in employment data. But look at the time. 2:30 in the afternoon, Moreno read. On October 22nd, Ginevra was at a conference in Seattle, Franklin said. She was on a plane at 2:30. She didn't have internet access. But who was home? I asked, my voice trembling. I checked your text history, Franklin said, looking at me with sad eyes. That was the week you asked your mom to go into our apartment to water the plants while we were both gone. You gave her the key. I felt like I was going to be sick. My mother had walked into my home, watered my ferns, and then what? Rummaged through my filing cabinet, found my social security card, written down the numbers. She is the keeper of the archives, I said, realizing the full scope of the betrayal. Mom has always been the one who keeps the birth certificates, the records. She knows the answers to the security questions because she created the answers. She knows the name of the first pet. She knows the street we grew up on. Tessa didn't need to hack anything. She just needed Mom. This changes the scope of the investigation, Detective Moreno said. She took the mortgage paper from Franklin. We are no longer looking at a single actor. We are looking at a conspiracy. If your mother facilitated the fraud, and your father knowingly used the proceeds to pay off his tax lien, they are accessories to the crime, potentially co-conspirators. Are you going to arrest them? I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I am going to arrest Tessa first, Moreno said. We have enough for a warrant right now. I am submitting it to the judge this afternoon. We will pick her up within 24 hours. She leaned forward. Ginevra, listen to me closely. Once the cuffs go on, the pressure on you is going to increase 1,000%. They will call you. They will come to your house. They will try to guilt you, threaten you, beg you. You cannot engage. Anything you say to them can be used by the defense to claim this was a misunderstanding. Do not answer the phone. I won't, I said. And Franklin, Moreno said, turning to him, they might try to go through you. They might view you as the weak link. Do not let them. They are dead to me, Franklin said. We left the station. The sky was gray and heavy with impending snow. I felt numb. The image of my mother's signature on that delivery receipt was burned into my retinas. She had signed away my future with the same hand she used to stroke my hair when I was sick. We drove home. I went straight to the bedroom and lay down in the dark. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was in a state of cold, analytical shock. I was reorganizing my entire history, reevaluating every memory I had of my family, looking for the rot I had missed. Around 7 o'clock that evening, Franklin was in the kitchen making tea. I heard his phone ring. He didn't answer it immediately. Then I heard him say, "Hello," in a guarded voice. I sat up. Franklin never used that tone. It was the tone of someone answering a call from a debt collector. I walked into the hallway. Franklin was standing by the refrigerator. The phone pressed to his ear. His face was pale. "No," he said. "I am not doing that. Tessa." Tessa. She was calling him. She was bypassing me, just as Moreno had predicted. "I don't care what you have," Franklin said. His hand was gripping the counter so hard his knuckles were white. "You can't threaten me." There was a pause. Franklin listened to whatever she was saying. I watched his expression shift from anger to fear, and then to a strange, resigned resolve. "Go ahead," Franklin said. "Do it. Tell her. I don't care." He hung up. He stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, breathing hard. "Franklin," I said softly. He jumped. He turned around to face me. He looked terrified. "That was her," he said. "I know," I said. "What did she want?" "She wanted me to convince you to drop the charges," Franklin said. "She said she knows the warrant is coming. She must have a friend at the clerk's office. Or maybe she is just paranoid. She said if I don't get you to stop, she is going to destroy us." "She already tried that with the documents," I said. "We sent that to the police." "No," Franklin said. He walked over to me. He took both of my hands. His palms were sweating. "She wasn't threatening to leak your documents this time. She was threatening to leak mine." I frowned. "Yours? What do you mean?" Franklin took a deep breath. "She said she did a background check on me too. When she was fishing for info on you, she looked at me, and she found something from before we met." My stomach dropped. What did she find? "Franklin, do you remember when we started dating?" he asked. "I told you I was debt-free. I told you I was saving for a car." "Yes," I said. "You were very responsible. That is one of the reasons I fell in love with you." "I wasn't debt-free," Franklin confessed. The words came out in a rush. "General, when I was 22, I was stupid. I had a gambling problem. Sports betting. I racked up $18,000 in debt. I defaulted on 3 cards. It went to collections. I spent 5 years paying it off, penny by penny. By the time I met you, the debt was paid, but the history was still on my report. I was terrified you wouldn't date me if you knew. So I lied. I said I was just thrifty. I hid the old statements." I stared at him. "You had a gambling addiction." "I went to meetings," he said quickly. "I haven't placed a bet in 8 years. I swear. But Tessa, she found the old court records from the collections agency. She threatened to tell you. She said, 'Ginevra will never trust a liar. Advise her to drop the case, or I will tell her who you really are.'" I looked at my husband. I looked at the man who had stood by me in the courtroom, the man who had driven me to the police station, the man who had defied my entire family to protect me. Tessa was trying to weaponize his shame. She was betting on my rigidity. She thought that because I was obsessed with financial purity, I would discard my husband over a past mistake. She thought I was exactly like our parents, that my love was conditional on a credit score. "Franklin," I said. He flinched, waiting for the verdict, waiting for me to yell. "Is that it?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "Is that the secret?" I asked. "That you made a mistake in your 20s, fixed it, went to therapy, paid off your debt, and moved on." "I lied to you," he said miserably. "I wasn't transparent." "You were scared," I said. "And honestly, maybe the old Ginevra would have judged you. The Ginevra from 3 weeks ago was a bit of a snob about numbers. I squeezed his hands. But Tessa just proved something to me, I said. She thinks secrets are weapons. She thinks she can blow up our marriage by revealing that you are human. She doesn't understand that we aren't like them. We don't hide things to manipulate each other. We solve them. You aren't mad, Franklin asked, his voice cracking. I am mad that she tried to use this against you, I said. I am furious that she made you feel unsafe in your own marriage. But Franklin, you paid your debt. You did the work. Tessa is trying to skip the work and steal the result. There is a difference. I reached up and touched his face. Call her back, I said. No, actually, don't call her. Text her. Put it in writing. What should I say? Tell her that you just told me everything, I said. Tell her that her leverage is gone. Tell her that the difference between you and her is that you own your mistakes, and she just creates new ones. Franklin nodded. The relief on his face was so profound it made him look 5 years younger. He pulled out his phone and typed the message. I told Ginevra about the gambling debt. We are fine. You have nothing on me, and you have nothing left to trade. He hit send. Now, I said. We wait for the police, but the wait wasn't long. The next morning, at 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Detective Moreno. Mrs. Holloway, she said. Her voice was professional, grim. I wanted to let you know. We executed the warrant. Tessa Holloway is in custody. We picked her up at your parents' house. Did she resist? I asked. She screamed, Moreno said. She screamed that you were a liar, and your mother tried to physically block the officers. We had to threaten her with obstruction of justice to get her to step aside. Is she in a cell? She is being processed now, Moreno said. The arraignment is tomorrow morning. You need to be there. Ginevra, the district attorney wants you to make a victim impact statement during the bail hearing. They are going to try to paint her as a low flight risk. We need you to tell the judge why that isn't true. I will be there, I said. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at the snow falling on the city. My sister was in a cage. My parents were likely consulting criminal defense lawyers. My family was a smoking crater. But as I looked at Franklin, who was sitting at the kitchen table reading the news, not hiding anything from me anymore, I realized something. Tessa had tried to break us to save herself. Instead, she had stripped away the last layer of secrets between us and welded us together. She had tried to prove that everyone was a liar, but all she had proved was that the truth, no matter how ugly, is the only thing that can actually set you free. Tomorrow, I said to the empty room, tomorrow, we finish it. The morning of the arraignment, I woke up before the alarm. The sky outside was the color of a bruised plum, dark and heavy with the threat of snow that never quite fell. I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, staring at the rows of hangers, trying to decide what a woman wears to watch her sister plead not guilty to destroying her life. I chose charcoal gray, a tailored suit with sharp lapels and a high neckline. It was not an outfit for a family reunion. It was a suit of armor. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun, securing every stray strand with hairspray until my scalp ached. I applied my makeup with the precision of a surgeon foundation to cover the sleepless circles under my eyes, blush to fake a pulse, and no mascara, just in case the armor cracked and I cried. Franklin drove us to the Milwaukee County Safety Building. The car was silent. We had said everything there was to say in the last 48 hours. We held hands across the center console, his grip tight, his thumb tracing the veins on the back of my hand. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one he usually reserved for parent-teacher conferences or weddings. Today, he looked like a man preparing for a funeral. You don't have to look at them, Franklin said as we walked up the concrete steps, the wind whipping at our coats. You just look at the judge. You look at the prosecutor. You pretend they are ghosts. They aren't ghosts, I said, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the pavement. Ghosts can't testify against you. The courtroom was Gallery 4B. It was a windowless box of wood paneling and fluorescent lights that buzzed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. The air smelled of floor wax, wet wool, and anxiety. We took our seats in the second row on the prosecution side. The assistant district attorney, a young woman named Sarah Prentice, who looked like she hadn't slept in a week, gave me a brief nod. They are going to argue for release on recognizance, she had told me earlier in the hallway. They will say she has strong community ties. They will say this is a family dispute. Your parents are on the witness list for the defense regarding bail conditions. I know, I had said. When the bailiff called out, "All rise," the room shuffled to its feet. The Honorable Renee Whitaker entered. She was a woman of indeterminate age, with steel-gray hair cut in a severe bob and eyes that looked like they could spot a lie from 3 counties away. She sat down, arranged her robes, and looked at the docket. State of Wisconsin versus Tessa Holloway, she read. The side door opened, and a deputy led Tessa in. She was not wearing handcuffs, but she looked like a prisoner. She was wearing the same clothes she had been arrested in, leggings and an oversized sweater that now looked slept in. Her hair was messy. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing blotchy, red skin. She walked with a stoop, making herself look smaller, younger, more fragile. It was a transformation so complete, I almost didn't recognize the woman who had smirked at me during the family meeting. She stood next to her public defender, a harried-looking man named Mr. Klein. "Miss Holloway," Judge Whitaker said, "you are charged with 7 counts of identity theft for financial gain and 3 counts of wire fraud. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Tessa whispered. Her voice trembled perfectly. It was the voice of a scared little girl who had lost her way in the woods, not a woman who had systematically embezzled $52,000. "We are requesting bail be set at $10,000 cash," the prosecutor, Ms. Prentice, stated. "The defendant has demonstrated a pattern of deception, has accessed funds to travel extensively, and we believe she poses a flight risk given the familial animosity." Mr. Klein stood up. "Your Honor, that is excessive. This is a first arrest. My client has lived in Milwaukee her whole life. This is, at its core, a domestic misunderstanding that has spiraled out of control. We have her parents here today. They are willing to vouch for her character and ensure her appearance at trial. We ask for release on her own recognizance." Judge Whitaker looked over her glasses. "Parents." "Yes, Your Honor, Howard and Marlene Holloway." I felt my stomach turn over. I gripped Franklin's hand so hard, I felt his ring dig into my skin. "Briefly," the judge said. My mother stood up. She walked to the podium typically reserved for attorneys. She clutched her purse with both hands. She looked at the judge, then she looked at Tessa with a gaze full of agonizing maternal love. She did not look at me. "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Klein said, "Does your daughter present a danger to the community?" "Oh, no," my mother said, her voice shaking. "No, never. Tessa is a good girl. She has a big heart. She just gets overwhelmed sometimes. She would never hurt anyone." "And what about the allegations?" Mr. Klein asked. "The complainant, your other daughter, Ginevra, claims this was malicious." My mother took a breath. She turned then. She turned her head slowly, deliberately, until her eyes met mine. In that courtroom, surrounded by strangers, police officers, and lawyers, my mother looked at me with a coldness that froze the blood in my veins. It wasn't anger, it was dismissal. It was the look one gives to a stranger who has been rude to a waiter. "Ginevra," my mother said into the microphone, her voice amplified for the record, "has always been difficult. She is exacting. She sees the world in black and white. She doesn't understand forgiveness." "So you believe this charge is motivated by something else, Mr.?" Klein asked. "She is vindictive," my mother said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Vindictive. She said it with such conviction, such sorrowful certainty. that I saw the court reporter pause for a fraction of a second. "She is vindictive," my mother repeated, turning back to the judge. "She is angry because Tessa needed help, and she didn't want to give it. Ginevra has always been cold. She cares about her bank accounts more than she cares about people. She is trying to punish us. She is trying to punish her sister for being human." I felt tears prick at my eyes hot. Stinging tears of humiliation. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. "I paid for your tax lien. I paid for your groceries. I am the only reason you have a roof over your head," but I couldn't move. I was frozen by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. She was under oath. She had placed her hand on a Bible and sworn to tell the truth. And then she had used that platform to assassinate my character to protect the child who had robbed us both. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway," the judge said. Her face remained impassive. She made a note on her legal pad. Then my father took the stand. If my mother was the emotional dagger, my father was the blunt instrument. He looked tired, beaten down, a man trying to hold up the sky. "We tried to handle this," my father told the judge, leaning heavily on the podium. "We called a family meeting. We wanted to pay Ginevra back. We offered to settle it privately, but she wouldn't listen. She walked out. She wanted this spectacle." "You offered restitution?" the judge asked. Her voice was neutral, unreadable. "We did." My father lied. "We told her we would handle it, but Ginevra, she is rigid. She doesn't give second chances. She doesn't give family a chance. She wants to see her sister destroyed because of money. It is just money, Your Honor. We can print more money. We can't print more family." "He is lying," I whispered to Franklin. "They didn't offer to pay. They wanted me to eat the debt." "Shh," Franklin whispered back, though his face was a mask of fury. "Let them talk. They are digging a hole." "It seems, Mr. Klein summarized, that the prosecuting witness is using this court to settle a personal score." I sat there, feeling stripped naked. The narrative was shifting. In the eyes of the room, I was no longer the victim of identity theft. I was the rich, heartless sister who was dragging her poor, struggling sibling through the mud because of a few credit card bills. I was the villain. I was the Shylock demanding a pound of flesh. Tessa sat at the defense table, her head bowed. But as my father finished speaking, as he said the words, "Ginevra is rigid," I saw her shift. She turned her head slightly to the right. She looked at me. Her eyes were dry, and there, just at the corner of her mouth, was a tiny, imperceptible curl. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of victory. It was a message. "See, they chose me. They will always choose me." It was the most painful moment of my life. It hurt more than the debt. It hurt more than the lost house. It was the confirmation that in the economy of my family's love, I was bankrupt. Judge Whittaker cleared her throat. The sound cut through the tension. She stopped writing. She capped her pen with a deliberate click. She did not look at the lawyers. She did not look at the bailiff. She picked up the file in front of her. It was the file Detective Moreno had submitted. It contained the police report, the credit card statements, the IP logs, and the supplementary report about the tax lien payment. She flipped a page, then another. The silence in the room stretched out, becoming thin and taut. "Mr. and Mrs. Holloway," Judge Whittaker said. Her voice was low, but it carried to the back of the room without effort. "Please stand up." My parents, who had started to move back to the gallery, froze. They looked at each other, confused. They stood up in the middle of the aisle, looking like two children called to the principal's office. "You stated under oath," Judge Whittaker said, looking over the rim of her glasses, "that your daughter, Ginevra, is vindictive. You stated that she cares only about money. You stated that this is a family matter that could have been resolved if she had been more forgiving." "Yes, Your Honor," my mother said, her voice trembling with righteous validation. "That is the truth. And you," the judge said, shifting her gaze to my father. "You stated that you offered restitution, that you tried to fix this." "We did," my father said. "We want to fix it. Judge Whittaker leaned forward. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She looked at them with an expression that was no longer neutral. It was an expression of intellectual disgust. "I have a police report here," she said, tapping the paper with her index finger. "It details $52,000 in fraudulent charges. It details a stolen identity. But it also details a transaction history involving a bank account in your names." My father went pale. "I see cash advances," the judge continued, her voice getting harder. "I see transfers, and I see a note from the detective regarding a tax lien on your property at 1890 Maplewood Terrace that was satisfied in December 12th, to be exact." She paused. "Now," Judge Whittaker said, "I'm going to ask you one question, just one, and I want you to think very carefully about your answer, because perjury is a felony in my courtroom." She looked straight at my mother. "If you claim Ginevra is vindictive for reporting this debt, and if you claim you wanted to handle this as a family—" The judge waited. The silence was absolute. I could hear the hum of the lights. I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. "Tell me," Judge Whittaker said, her voice slicing through the room like a razor. "When you discovered that $50,000 of debt had been accrued in Ginevra's name, which one of you offered in writing, or by liquidating your own assets to assume that legal debt yourselves to spare your vindictive daughter from financial ruin?" My mother's mouth opened. She made a sound, a small, choked gasp. She looked at my father. My father looked at his shoes. They stood there. 1 second passed, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. The answer hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The answer was no one. The answer was that they had taken the money to pay their taxes, and they had expected me to pay the bill. And as the silence stretched on, I watched the color drain out of my mother's face as if someone had reached inside her and turned off the switch. The silence that followed Judge Whittaker's question was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and filled with the leaden weight of the truth. "I will ask you again," Judge Whittaker said, her voice devoid of the sharp edge it had held a moment ago, replaced now by a quiet, deadly curiosity. "Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, you stand here and accuse the victim of being vindictive. You claim that this matter could have been resolved within the family. So, I am asking you a simple question of fact. When you learned that your daughter Ginevra was saddled with over $50,000 in fraudulent debt, did either of you at any point offer to sign a promissory note, liquidate an asset, or take out a loan in your own names to clear that balance so that your innocent daughter could proceed with her life?" My mother's mouth opened and closed. She looked like a fish gasping for air on a dock. She looked at Mr. Klein, the public defender, as if hoping he would object, but he didn't. He was staring at the table, realizing that his character witnesses had just become the prosecution's greatest asset. My father looked down at his shoes. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He cleared his throat, but no sound came out. The silence stretched on for 10 seconds, then 20. It was long enough for everyone in the gallery, the bailiff, the clerk, the few bored retirees watching the proceedings to understand exactly what kind of parents they were. "No," my father finally whispered. The word was so quiet it barely registered on the microphone. "Speak up, please," Judge Whittaker commanded. "No, Your Honor," my father said, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. "We are not in a financial position to do that. We are retired." "You are retired," the judge repeated. "And yet, you expected your daughter, who is trying to buy her first home, to absorb a $50,000 loss caused by a crime you expected her to pay for her sister's luxury vacations and your own property tax debts, because you were not in a position to pay. But you felt she was—" My mother let out a small sob. "We just wanted peace," she cried. "We didn't want the girls fighting." "You didn't want peace," Judge Whittaker said, leaning back in her chair. "You wanted silence. There is a difference. Peace is the presence of justice. Silence is just the absence of noise. You wanted Ginevra to be silent so you wouldn't have to deal with the noise of Tessa's crimes." She picked up her gavel, not to strike it, but to hold it, a symbol of the authority she was about to wield. "I have heard enough regarding bail," she stated. "The defense argues that the defendant has strong family ties. I see a family that is deeply enmeshed in a cycle of enabling and financial abuse. I see a defendant who has been protected from the consequences of her actions for decades, to the point where she felt comfortable stealing the identity of her own sister." She looked at Tessa. "Tessa Holloway, I am setting bail at $25,000 cash, no 10% surety, full cash bond." Tessa gasped. "I don't have that kind of money," she blurted out. "Then perhaps you should not have spent $50,000 that did not belong to you," the judge replied coolly. "Furthermore, I am imposing a strict no-contact order. You are to have absolutely no contact with Ginevra Holloway or Franklin Rowland. No calls, no texts, no third-party messages through your parents. If I hear that you have sent so much as a carrier pigeon to their home, I will revoke your bail and you will await trial in a cell. Do you understand?" "Yes," Tessa whispered. She was trembling now. But it wasn't the fake tremble of the victim. It was the real, visceral shaking of someone who realizes the walls are closing in. "And one more thing," Judge Whitaker added, looking at my parents. "While you are not currently on trial, I am forwarding the transcript of today's hearing and the evidence regarding the tax lien payment to the District Attorney's Fraud Division. If you knowingly accepted stolen funds to pay your debts, that is receipt of stolen property, I suggest you retain your own counsel." My mother let out a wail. My father grabbed her arm to steady her. They looked at me then, their eyes wide with panic and betrayal, as if I were the one who had just sentenced them. But I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I looked right through them. Then, the final nail was hammered in. Sarah Prentice, the prosecutor, stood up. "Your Honor, the state would also like to enter into the record a new piece of financial evidence that we received this morning from the forensic audit. It pertains to the argument of necessity versus luxury." She held up a document. "We have traced a payment of $4,000 from one of the fraudulently opened cards, the Platinum Visa, directly to a cosmetic surgery clinic in Chicago. The date corresponds with a Botox and fillers party that the defendant posted about on social media. This was not money for food. This was not money for rent. This was vanity, funded by her sister's credit rating." The courtroom let out a collective ripple of murmur. I looked at Tessa. She wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking at me. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was ugly. It was the face of a narcissist who had lost her supply. There was no remorse in her eyes. There was only the fury of a predator who had been defanged. She mouthed something to me. I couldn't hear it, but I could read her lips perfectly. "You will pay for this." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of her anger. I felt pity. I realized that she was trapped in a prison of her own making, a prison of endless need and envy, and no amount of my money would ever have been enough to fill the void inside her. "I already have," I mouthed back, "but I am done paying now." The deputies moved in. They handcuffed Tessa. The click of the metal was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It sounded like a lock snapping shut on a cage that had been open for far too long. My parents watched, helpless, as their golden child was led away through the side door. Not to a spa, but to a holding cell. We walked out of the courtroom into the cold Milwaukee air. The snow had finally started to fall, dusting the gray concrete with white. "Are you okay?" Franklin asked, wrapping his arm around me. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. "I think," I said, "that is the first time in 34 years that I have breathed air that didn't smell like guilt." The legal process that followed was not dramatic. It was a slow, grinding machine of bureaucracy, which is exactly what revenge by law looks like. It is not a duel at dawn. It is a series of filings, motions, and plea deals. Tessa did not go to trial. Confronted with the mountain of evidence, the IP logs, the signature verifications, the courier receipts, and the damning testimony of her own spending habits, her lawyer advised her to cut a deal. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of felony identity theft and 1 count of fraud. The sentence was not prison time, which I knew would disappoint some people who wanted to see her rot. But in many ways, it was worse for someone like Tessa. She received 3 years of strict probation. She was ordered to perform 500 hours of community service, not the fun kind, but picking up trash on the highway and scrubbing graffiti. But the real punishment was financial. She was ordered to pay full restitution, $52,480. The court garnished her wages. Since she couldn't get a job in any industry that required a background check, no more brand ambassador roles where she handled budgets. No more retail jobs with access to registers. She ended up working in a call center for minimum wage. Every paycheck she earned was sliced in half. With the money routed directly to me, she also has a permanent felony record. In the digital age, that is a life sentence. Every time someone Googles Tessa Holloway, the first thing that comes up isn't her fashion blog or her party photos. It is the mugshot from the Milwaukee County Jail, where she looks tired, angry, and distinctly unglamorous. She lost her social standing. She lost her friends, who only liked her for the champagne she bought. She became a pariah in the very social circles she had stolen from me to impress. As for my parents, they escaped criminal charges by the skin of their teeth. They hired a lawyer who argued that they were elderly and confused, that they had been manipulated by Tessa just as much as I had. The district attorney decided it wasn't worth the resources to prosecute them. But the damage was done. Their reputation in the community was shattered. The neighbors knew. The church knew. They were no longer the respectable Holloways. They were the people who had helped their daughter rob their other daughter. Franklin and I had our own rebuilding to do. The $52,000 of debt didn't vanish overnight, while the fraud determination removed the liability from my name legally. The process of scrubbing my credit report took 8 agonizing months. I had to send letters, make calls, and fax police reports until my fingers cramped. But we did it. We did it together. Franklin took on extra tutoring shifts to help build our savings back up. We sat at the kitchen table every Friday night, not with fear, but with a new kind of partnership. We were transparent. We were a team. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a notification on my phone. My credit score had been updated. It was 720. It wasn't the 785 I had started with, but it was mine. It was a clean number. It was a number that told the truth. 2 weeks later, we got the call. A small bungalow in Shorewood had come onto the market. It wasn't the Colonial in Whitefish Bay. It was smaller, and it needed a new kitchen, but it had a garden for Franklin and a home office for me. We applied. When the underwriter called, he didn't ask about fraud. He didn't ask about debt. He said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Rowland, you are approved." I cried then. I cried not because of the house, but because I had reclaimed my name. I have not spoken to my parents in a year. They tried. Of course. My mother sent letters. She sent birthday cards with $20 bills inside, as if a $20 bill could fix a $50,000 betrayal. She left voicemails crying about how lonely they were, about how Tessa was struggling and needed family support. I didn't block them. I just didn't answer. I listened to the voicemails once, archived them as evidence in case I ever needed a restraining order, and went back to my life. I have set a boundary that is as high and thick as a fortress wall. I will not attend any event where they are present. I will not respond to guilt trips. I will not accept their version of reality where family means hostage. The first restitution check arrived in the mail last Tuesday. It was a check from the State of Wisconsin Department of Corrections, printed on cheap green paper. The amount was small, $112.50. It was a fraction of what she owed. At this rate, it will take her 40 years to pay me back. But I didn't cash it for the money. I took the check to the bank. I stood in line. I handed it to the teller. "Checking or savings?" she asked. "Principal," I said, smiling. "Put it toward the principal of my mortgage." Walking out of the bank into the bright, crisp sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. That check wasn't just currency. It was a symbol. It was proof that I was no longer the one absorbing the cost. I was no longer the silent partner in my own destruction. They called me vindictive. They called me cold. They said I destroyed the family. But I know the truth. I didn't destroy the family. I just stopped being the load-bearing wall for a house that was built on a foundation of lies. I let it collapse so I could build something real in its place, and looking at the keys to my own home, a home bought with honesty and protected by boundaries. I know I made the right choice. Sometimes, the only way to save your future is to bankrupt your past. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a long journey, but I wanted to share every detail to show that sometimes standing up for yourself is the hardest, yet most necessary thing you can do. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story from? Are you in the kitchen? In the car? Or maybe at work, hiding a headphone like I used to? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about justice being served, please subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who might need the courage to stand up for themselves. See you in the next story.